Welcome back to our journey through the National Electrical Code, where we help break down technical topics into plain, understandable language. In this episode, we're continuing from our last discussion on available fault current, specifically focusing on NEC 110.24b modifications. If you're new to the electrical field, this section is extremely important because it addresses a key question. What happens if something changes in the electrical system? Does the fault current label stay the same? Let's find out. Before we jump into part B, let's quickly recap. Available fault current is the highest amount of electrical current that could flow through a system if there's a short circuit, like when a hot wire touches a grounded metal panel. This current surge can be massive, tens of thousands of amps, and it's dangerous if equipment isn't properly rated. So, under NEC 110.24a, service equipment must have a label showing the calculated fault current and the date that it was determined. But what happens when that number changes? That is where 110.24b comes in. Here's what the code says, simplified. If any changes are made to the electrical system that affect the available fault current, the label on the service equipment must be updated to reflect the new value and the date it was calculated. Let's break that down into everyday terms. If you upgrade the transformer, change the service conductors, or even move to a different utility provider, these changes can increase or decrease the fault current at your panel. Because of that, the old label may no longer be accurate, and in the electrical world, accuracy matters a lot. So the NEC 110.24b requires you to recalculate the available fault current after any major system modifications and update the label with a new fault current value and a new date of calculation. This keeps the system safe, compliant, and transparent for anyone working on it in the future. So why was 110.24b written into the code in the first place? The reason is simple but serious. Over time, electrical systems change, and when they do, the original available fault current value might no longer be correct. Let's say a facility upgrades its transformers to handle more load. That sounds like a good thing, right? But a bigger transformer often means lower impedance, which leads to higher fault current. If nobody updates the label, electricians might look at it and think, hey, this panel can handle 25,000 amps, but the real available fault current now might be 40,000 amps. That's a huge safety risk. The wrong equipment could fail during a fault, possibly causing equipment damage, electrical fires, or even life-threatening flash incidents. So NEC 110.24b was created to make sure that fault current label always stays up to date and accurate. It's about keeping people safe, keeping systems reliable, and ensuring that changes don't introduce hidden dangers. Now let's look at what actually counts as a modification that requires the label to be updated. These can include upgrading the utility transformer, changing the length or size of the service conductors, replacing the service panel, switching utility providers, installing new parallel feeders, and anything that could change how much current can flow during a fault. If in doubt, check it out. Ask your supervisor or engineer if a new fault current calculation is needed after a change. Let's walk through a real-world scenario. You're an apprentice working on a commercial building. A new 500 kilowatt transformer is installed to replace an older 300 kilowatt amp unit. Sounds like an upgrade, right? But with the bigger transformer, the available fault current at the main panel jumps from 22,000 amps to 36,000 amps. The original panel still says 22,000 amps. Now there's a mismatch. That panel might not be rated for 36,000 amps. In this case, NEC 110.24b requires a new calculation of the fault current, a new label showing 36,000 amps, and updated date when the calculation was made. Only then are you back in compliance and back to being safe. If you're just starting out in the trade, here are some helpful takeaways. Don't assume that the label is accurate forever. Check the date. Understand how system changes affect fault current. Bigger transformers and shorter wire runs equal more fault current. Get comfortable with reading and updating field labels. Work with engineers or supervisors to determine when recalculations are necessary. And always remember, codes like 110.24b exist to save lives. Even if you don't know how to perform the calculations yourself, knowing when they are required makes you a smarter, more reliable electrician. And that wraps up our deep dive into NEC 110.24b modifications. To recap, this rule requires updating the available fault current label anytime system changes affect the value. It keeps workers, property, and equipment safe. It ensures your electrical system stays up to the code even as it evolves. Thanks for tuning in.